Hello, hello. This is Pete Ozen with the Bending Rules podcast, where we talk about all things entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial journey, trials, tribulations, successes, failures, and anything else they might want to relate to that journey. And so today, I've got my co-host Fish Capdevila here with us, and guest Michael Ulin, and he'll introduce himself here in a minute and get into his background. But we're gonna cover some of the startups that he's done. I think setting this up a little bit, what I'm pretty excited about today is in the context of we have a co-founder of a current startup that's also on the technical side. And so some of the guests we've had on are obviously can go very deep in aspects of their business and operations, but he's going to have a perspective on the technology that's very current, using AI tools and moving in and out of that, that realm of AI tools and predating AI tools and so forth. So I'm excited to learn more about that. He's also in a space that I've worked in closely, the legal space, and doing some great things with a new company called Paxton.AI. And we'll talk about that too, as we talk about your entrepreneurial journey and what that product does, and actually successfully just closed a really pretty big Series A round. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Gets to put that to work and innovate. So we're going to be excited to learn what you can do with that. So Michael, thank you, and for taking time out, especially since you just did close down. I'm sure you probably got 2 or 3 meetings on the heels of this, right? Chris and I, we just have a walk scheduled, so our demands are not as significant. But thanks for being here with us today. And I think maybe just start by introducing yourself and how you got into maybe being an entrepreneur and what kind of led you down that path, and a little bit about your origins. And of course, either of us will jump in and derail you as quickly as we can. But thanks again. And yeah, I think we start there and just get to know you a little bit.
Sure. No, appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to be here. I don't know. You want me to start at the very, very beginning?
Yeah, I'm going more like sort of like your entrepreneurial route.
Yeah. What made you go down that path versus others? Or maybe did you just kind of fall into that?
Yeah. No, I think I come from a family, like my dad started his own business. He's a doctor, and my grandfather started a HVAC cleaning company. So it's kind of a family tradition to be entrepreneurial. When I was in grade school, middle school, I started building computers and selling them on eBay. And we had this model where we would conduct the auction on eBay, take in the cash, and then go buy the parts on eBay to actually assemble the computer.
Just in time.
Just in time. So we would tell people we had 30 days to deliver the computer, get the cash in, and then go buy it, assemble it, ship it out. And so I was doing that from an early age. I remember my 7th grade teacher told me, like, you're either going to end up in jail or a millionaire. So
It's not very entrepreneurial. That's awesome.
So, did that for a bit.
That verdict is to be determined. No, I think you're already in the laughing factor. We'll see. You're still a young guy.
Yeah. Quite a thing for a 7th grader to hear. Then went to college and got into the world of consulting after that. So I was at McKinsey Company for a couple of years, and got to see the different generations of AI. So back then we were calling it big data. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
And helping McKinsey's clients figure that whole transition out. Did my 2 years there. It's a really, it's a tough gig. Like, you're traveling constantly, working really long weeks. And so I got tired of that, especially the travel part. So I moved from Boston to the Bay Area, took a job at an early legal tech company called RPX, which was actually it was the fastest IPO in the Kleiner Perkins history that we were doing.
What year was this around?
This was about 2012.
2012. Good timing in the markets. Yeah.
Okay. So RPX helped large technology firms like Google, Apple, Microsoft acquire patents that might be of interest to those companies. Like patent trolls were a big thing back then, and making sure patents didn't fall into the hands of people who would create a lot of annoyances for large tech firms was a big focus of theirs. We would use natural language processing, AI, to help identify the patents along with other kind of feedback and metrics on them.
Did the kids in the audience hear that? This was 2012. Natural language processing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Early days. Yeah.
so rudimentary compared to what we can do today.
Right.
Yeah.
But so did 2 years there, and then joined up with a couple other ex McKinsey folks, and they were starting a company called Power Scout, which was an online marketplace for solar panels. If you wanted to get solar panels installed, and a variety of reasons that didn't end up working out. So that was a pretty tough journey. We had to lay a lot of people off and shut the company down. But the couple of us who were left came together, and we started a new company called Zesty AI, kind of using the same tech. So we were using image recognition, machine learning to figure out how many solar panels you could put on a house. And we transitioned to understanding like the aspects of the roof and what sort of things in an image you could detect that would influence the level of risk a property insurer was going to take on for insuring a home. So we started selling data to insurance companies, and that took off. So did that for 8 years. We scaled it to about 100 people, tens of millions in revenue, and got to our Series B and worked with some of the largest insurance companies in the world, like Farmers, Berkshire Hathaway, and then generative AI came out, and I was like, man, this is the next technological platform, kind of akin to the shift to mobile or the shift to the internet or cloud computing. And I think, would love to hear your guys' perspective on this, but like, I think it works really well with company formation if you can kind of catch a wave, like a platform shift.
Yeah.
And so I saw that happening, and I was like, well, I don't want to miss this one. So started Paxton with my co-founder, Tanguy Chau. And we've been doing that for the last 2 years. And like you mentioned, we just closed our Series A. So we're kind of off the races there. But I'm on the technical side. So I'm the CTO at Paxton. And we're very focused on applying generative AI to help attorneys in their work do better legal research, document drafting, and file analysis.
Nice. It's fascinating that you've had essentially your entire career, other than just-in-time computer assembly, has been in the AI space, right? A lot of us think that AI just magically appeared, but
Yeah.
been companies and people, important people working on it for decades. And I'm curious, as you look at that trajectory that you've experienced, starting back in early 2010, 11, 12, what do you think is different these days in terms of having a company? Is the level of change one that's good? Is it bad because things are changing so quickly? And one of the things I was talking about with a friend was the fact that things are changing so quickly. It's like you think you're going down the direction, and all of a sudden in a week, your business is gone because things have fundamentally changed so much, right? Where I think in prior decades, the level of technological change was so much slower, right? So I'm curious if you've got any thoughts on that, and how do you deal with that as a startup?
I think, yeah, the world just keeps going faster and faster, right? I mean, you look at the different rates of adoption for all these different platform or technological shifts. Like, I think for everyone to get like a telephone, it was decades or maybe even 100 plus years from when that technology came about. Like a car was similar. Television went faster than that, though. The computer went faster than that. That was only a couple decades. But then we got the smartphone, and that was just a decade. And now we're here with like generative AI. And I think it was, less than a month, less than 6 months for ChatGPT to get to 100 million users. So I think the rate at which these cycles occur just keeps getting faster and faster. And maybe that's got to do with all the communications technology we have today and the rate of spread of that. But I don't see that slowing down. But to your point, like, a lot of these like overnight successes took decades. The underlying tech for today's AI models was developed in the 1950s. Neural networks. And they actually almost didn't make it, which is kind of interesting to me. Like, in the 50s, there just wasn't the amount of compute power, energy, data to actually make these things function. And so it kind of sat on the shelf for a while.
Mm.
And there were various points of like AI winters over, since then, and like different types of approaches to like AI. Like I think in the 80s, like there was an effort to try and encode all human knowledge in machine readable form, which was just not tenable. Like, so neural networks were this thing, like kind of a fringe idea. And what was interesting to me is like Canadian universities kind of kept this flame alive of neural networks. So it was the University of Toronto, University of Montreal, who kind of kept this crazy idea of like, okay, we can learn a model from data. Like we're not going to program it a priori to do something. We're actually going to take data and try to learn the weight of the model from the data. And
Which was a total flip, right? Of
Right.
how the
like,
technology of the day, or the approaches of the day.
or even today, like you think about what a software engineer does, right? Like they are coding rules that will do like, if I see this, do that.
Yeah.
And the powerful thing with generative AI or these AI models is like, you don't necessarily need to do that. You can have a model that looks at, in the case of generative AI, the entirety of human written output, like the internet, all of the books that have ever been written, and learn a model that knows how to produce something from that, which is like total paradigm shift to how like software engineers work, right?
Yeah.
So pulling on this thread a little bit more with the relative changes that have occurred, because that was helpful to sort of understanding sort of the acceleration over decades with these various technologies. But then within the technology itself, because I'm kind of dealing with this with a couple of AI companies that I'm advising involved with, which is the tool proliferation itself. And are you finding that to be additive? Or are you finding that you are going down a path developing a model, let's say for Paxton.AI, and you're doing some document drafting and research tools, production, that then you have to change your underlying technology or adopt a new one because suddenly something came out
changing so fast
and it's more efficient, or are these changes incremental enough where you're able to sort of, that's not a fair word, easily, because nothing happens really easily in technology, but it's not as much of a heartburn to roll it up into the next version of the platform or something of that nature. So again, same question, a little bit more micro on the actual tools themselves.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's going to be a lot of companies formed in this technological shift, and there's various kind of places in the value chain where you could plug in. Paxton, we're at the application layer. We're trying to add value to end users
in a vertical.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to be. Yeah, I'm biased over here, but
we would agree. I would wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. The plumbing layer is going to be very competitive.
Absolutely. And you have to deal with all these shifts, and like the technology is evolving super fast. But what we've been able to do is kind of create a framework where, it doesn't really matter the underlying changes to the models or the shifts there. As long as we're kind of in this paradigm of large language models, we can plug and play with those. And so we ultimately care about like delivering the most value we can to the end user. And they don't really care what goes behind the scenes. They just need, they're doing legal research. They need an answer to their legal research question. They don't much care if I'm using, OpenAI or Google Gemini. At the end of the day, they just want that answer. So I think at the application layer, it's easier to take advantage of those shifts in tech because you can just, if something's working better, I can just swap it out. I retain that customer relationship. So as long as I'm doing a good job for them, I'll continue to own that relationship. But if you're like a plumbing vendor,
you could be out of business.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. The large language models have been called the fastest depreciating asset in history.
At huge valuations.
Yeah, billions of dollars of capital invested, and you have DeepSeek come out and throw a whole wrench into that. But there's kind of an interesting memo that leaked out of Google. I don't know if you guys saw it, where one of their engineers was like, "We don't have a moat, and neither does OpenAI."
Interesting.
And I think there's some kind of thinking that the amount of capital and the investment in data centers could be that moat for a company like OpenAI. But then you have these Chinese firms who have been forced because of export controls to get super efficient in developing models, who are kind of upending that. So what are going to be the moats for these underlying tech companies, because the world's changing so fast? So I'd rather be where I am, the value chain, because we can take advantage of all of that and not have to worry about, being on that treadmill of just like constantly investing capital to be the cutting edge provider of LLMs.
And so does that lead to like fundamental differences or changes in how you architect the technology, kind of the underlying layer, or do you just kind of get used to, does the team get used to a rip and replace, like a constant rip and replace, right? We were working on this last quarter. Now there's something way better. Let's, just throw that all out and replace it with X.
Right. Yeah, you kind of have to get used to that and build it into your system. I think there's a couple frameworks out there like LangChain. We use one called Burr, which we built on top of. Kind of abstracts away the model layer, so we can just plug in a new model as we go. And then you need to have good ways of evaluating models very quickly. And so it's kind of a different paradigm from software engineering, where again, you're like writing those explicit rules. For AI development and model development, where these things don't behave in a deterministic way, you kind of have to have a good test set of like, okay, here's all the outputs that I expect, and does this new model do well on that test set? And if it does, then I feel comfortable swapping it out. And you can automate that whole process of like, okay, I have this test set. Here's how the new model did on it. Pass all the test cases. So let's put it into production or roll it out to a subset of users, see how it does, and then scale it up to production. But I think companies that come up under this paradigm, like, are going to be used to that in a way that I think older companies,
we'll have a hard time adapting.
Yeah, it's like a cultural shift. It's an organizational shift. It's the fundamental
skill set shift to some extent too, right?
Yeah. So I see all these, everyone's on the hot AI wave right now. And I see all these companies like bolting on these like half-baked products, half-baked, AI experiences to the products. And like, I think a lot of people are annoyed at that. Versus you look at companies that did well in the prior platform shifts, like the shift to mobile. The winners there were companies that were mobile native.
They were native, yeah.
Not
Nokia, perfect example, right? Yeah.
Or like Airbnb or Uber, like, these guys built the best mobile experiences, and, the incumbents, I think they do a good job now, but, they weren't the winners.
Early on, it was difficult to make that transition. The experiences were quite different. They didn't have the UX people that were sort of associated with that. I mean, even I sort of encountered that as we went through a transition and mobile became more prevalent and mobile apps were expected, right? You're like, well, no, we got this thing, go use this thing over here. And is it in your mind with the AI tools that they need to be mobile as well? I mean, that's still the starting point, because you're doing like legal research or work product development. Are they more friendly to the desktop environment, or?
Yeah, I mean, most of our users are on the desktop, but I've been actually surprised. I mean, we have a responsive app for Paxton, and I've been surprised at how many people use it on their phone. Like, like we get attorneys who are like, oh, I'm in court and I need to look something up really quickly on the fly, and it's been great for that.
Well, maybe they're secretly in Hawaii.
Exactly.
Virtual court. Yeah. That's awesome.
Or, people can do this on their computer too. But like, we have like attorneys who are on the phone with their clients who are like, now they can respond in real time to a client question about the law, versus like they used to have to say, I'll get back to you in a couple of days because I need to ask, the partner who's knowledgeable on that, or I need to go use LexisNexis or Westlaw.
So let's continue down that thinking just as it relates to Paxton a little bit, because, you're finding an advantage offering a solution that gets to that legal research. And a lot of that's through sort of domain expertise or the prompts that you put in to sort of make them give you, more accurate or useful examples than if you were just using ChatGPT native, right? Or combining these various tools. And that sounds like the value advantage that you're going for. Does that sum it up to some extent, or what is it that you're doing this, giving you that advantage without getting into your proprietary stuff, just more sort of this kind of like
at high level.
Yeah, generically, like when you see these come, like you were saying, hey, I think it's better to operate in this application layer. And what advice do you have for companies operating an application layer?
Yeah, there's I don't know if you've heard this like pejorative term, like ChatGPT wrapper about companies. And, like everyone today has access to the, OpenAI API or the Gemini API. And so you can build on top of that. And, I think some people, especially like the early adopter or innovator types, are like, well, I can just do that on ChatGPT.
Why do I need you?
Why do I need you? But then you go and you look at that and it's like, oh, my developer says, oh, I can just do that in the command line. Like your average user is not going to do that. And, I think the prior generation of startups could have been called like a SQL database wrapper, right?
Right.
Like, all these CRM companies like Salesforce, like,
Totally.
like, it's just a nice UI on top of a database.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
that's a really
that way.
That's a great analogy right there. Too.
Well, and you're automating the workflow too, right? And the domain, the specifics of that domain that you're building an application for, right? Which ChatGPT will never do.
Right.
Yeah, most likely not, right? Help me understand, like, this is going to seem like, but I just, for the audience perspective, because I heard a lot about, you hear about LLMs and then you hear about small language models. I mean, do those two things, are you operating with both those constructs, or where does small language in this scenario of, developing verticalized specific applications?
Yeah. And I think it's important to know, like, AI is not just large language models. And it's not just transformers, which is kind of the underlying architecture that most large language models and small language models are built on today. But there's some cool new architectures coming up, and we'll see if those kind of catch on to deal with some of the deficiencies of the transformer architecture. But when you submit something to Paxton, it's not like you're just getting a one-for-one response from an LLM. There's actually kind of an intricate pipeline behind the scenes of like, okay, I'm going to look up the information. I'm going to check if it's relevant. Then I'm going to synthesize everything that I've found and then write something up. And at each one of those stages, we test different models. So we see what performs best in terms of speed or latency, response quality, and cost. And so there's a wide variety of language models in the market today that try to balance those factors. So a small language model might be really speedy, might cost a lot less because it doesn't have the same like hardware requirements as like a large language model, but you're not going to get the like best reasoning or output capabilities there. But it just depends on your application and what are your requirements. Like maybe you really care about cost or latency, so that you should go with a small language model in that case. But it's just really about understanding what are the requirements for your particular job to be done and optimizing accordingly. And, you see like all the model providers have like a family of models these days that will, kind of give you what you want in terms of like, oh, here's the latest and greatest thing, but it's slow to run. Or, we need to do a bunch of document processing over billions of documents. So we need to keep costs down. So we want to use a smaller model, but the stuff we're extracting from those documents isn't so complicated. So it's just about balancing all that stuff.
And how are you guys dealing with, I know in prior AI companies that I've been involved in, a lot of the challenge was in understanding the specific language of the domain that you were in. And how are you finding that LLMs handle that challenge, I guess? Are you guys having to do a lot of proprietary work to be able to handle the vocabulary of the vertical that you guys are in this case legal? Or are you finding that they're pretty good at understanding sort of, the detailed language of a vertical?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the space you're in. For us, you have to think about how these things were trained. Most large language models are trained on the text of the internet.
A lot of legal text.
Exactly. Like in the US, it's all public domain.
Yeah.
So it forms like a big chunk of the corpus that these things are trained on.
That's why ChatGPT always sounds like a lawyer when
Sorry, I can't give you that.
Yeah, exactly.
We're in a gray area.
Exactly.
Call your lawyer.
But you see, you see some efforts around like, I think the French company Mistral just introduced a model that was specialized for some Middle Eastern languages. And you see some efforts to kind of deal with like the deficiencies in this kind of base trading set, because you think about, what are the biases of the overall internet? It's kind of weighted towards English language. It's weighted towards like public domain stuff or like Reddit stuff. So you have these other companies who are trying to train specialist models on domains that might not be well represented in that data set.
That is interesting. I also think that, bridges in sort of proprietary data too. Like how much proprietary data can you take, or internal data, let's say from a law firm or another customer, to sort of give a value add experience that you're not going to just get from the public domain information. And is that something that is important to your customer base, or you think will become more important? Because like in our customer base, which we both showed this past in legal companies, I mean, they've got a lot of language, right? It's their own work. And how comfortable are they participating in a model? And I mean, there's so many technical aspects of that too. How do you wall off that from what's public? But is that part of the vision of the future, you think, is to have those two things kind of intermingle more and create more of a walled off advantage? I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, people can connect their documents today to Paxton, and we get a lot of folks who get value out of that. And I don't know about how you guys keep your files, but, for me, it's like a big pile, and like, I know there's some useful stuff in there, but large language models and Paxton are great about surfacing that stuff. If I just have like a malformed natural language question about what I'm looking for, I don't need to like come up with those specific keywords that are actually in the document anymore. I can be like, oh, I was thinking of that, guy, he sent me a letter.
And I have his name. You find his name, and hopefully quickly.
Right. So LLMs are great with dealing with that sort of like, oh, I know some aspects about what I'm looking for, but I don't know the exact words. So it's great for surfacing that sort of information. But for us, we need to add value on top of what you can get out of the box from ChatGPT. And we've done so by connecting to all the laws, regulations, court decisions, plus users' own files. And I think in the legal domain, there's been these like kind of horror stories of, the ChatGPT lawyer, if you guys have heard of those cases, where someone doesn't quite understand AI and this problem of hallucinations. So
they're taking legal advice from ChatGPT.
And it's actual attorneys or lawyers who you think you would know better. But they take the actual output of ChatGPT, and these court decisions like sound real, like they're formatted like actual court decisions. But when the courts go to look them up, they're like, they don't exist. And so a lot of like ChatGPT users have gotten in trouble for this. And so with Paxton, you actually get the citation back to the primary source. So all the citations are guaranteed to exist because we have a database of all of them, and we have footnotes back to the actual decision. So you can go check and verify, like, is this what it actually claims to be? And so that gives our users a lot of confidence in what we do, which is, I think, a good example of how like a specialist or vertical application can add value on top of just what's available from the generalist platforms.
And it's usually going to come in the realm of trust and confidence, right? Would be my guess.
Yeah.
It's been qualified and everything of that nature. So we kind of went right into hammering Michael with a lot of technical. He feels like we're giving a technical review of.
We're so excited. I know we have and
I feel like I let him off the hook with some other stuff that's more sort of germane to your journey a little bit too. So thank you for
going deep.
Yeah, going deep with us on that sort of level. And I hope that, some of our many users here will benefit, or listeners will benefit from that as well. And I kind of want to roll back a little bit to the building blocks of your story, though, and because I think the other thing that, it's important to understand in the entrepreneur journey is there's a lot of dark hours, there's a lot of challenges, not everything always goes well. End result for you has been pretty good. You got RPX, and that was, went public quickly, and obviously there are a lot of probably challenges along the way there, even in that scenario, getting to that great end result. But you did mention there was a company started and it was a failure, and then you went another route with Zesty AI. I want to hear kind of a little bit more about those outcomes with Zesty AI and maybe your failure and the challenges, and it's usually not just one thing, but if you could kind of point back to and help our audience and listeners maybe understand, like, why do you think that one failed when these other ones succeeded? Is there anything that you changed going forward when you, from that company that you took into your other companies that could be additive to, someone else's journey that might be listening here today? I told you I was going to sometime ask 3 questions.
Always fine, but
It took me like 30 minutes to do that. So it's pretty good. I feel like I did a decent job of listening.
yeah. And feel free to ask, what was the fourth question?
I won't remember it. No. So, but you see where I'm at.
No, absolutely.
Those experiences. And I'm always so just interested in, just generally speaking, the topic of failure and how builds
how you grow from it.
Yeah, how you grow for that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people want to talk about, the linear straight up into the right path, which never actually exists anywhere.
No.
And I think it does a disservice that I think more people don't talk about it. So I think, yeah, like you, I've benefited from hearing about those experiences, but also living them, even though they were really painful at the time. So Power Scout, I mean, we were like a bunch of B2B guys, like from McKinsey, trying to do a consumer tech startup.
Oh, yeah.
So
not riding away.
it's the number one. Okay, I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
With other mistakes we also. Okay, so B2B.
know your strengths.
Yeah.
So that's probably one. We didn't have a recurring revenue model, which, I mean, we were connecting local installation companies with consumers who wanted solar panels. So we had recurring revenue from the installation companies, but we had to work to acquire a customer on the consumer side. There wasn't, I mean, with Paxton, it's great, or with Zesty, like, we get recurring revenues once we sign a customer, or we can grow that customer. But if you're getting solar panels on your house, you get them.
It's a one and done.
Yeah. And like, maybe you get some referrals if you did a good job, but it's really hard to build, I think, a VC backable business or I mean, there's installation companies and there's a bunch of businesses that work off of kind of one and done sort of models, but I think it's really hard in software, and especially if you want to raise venture capital to do that. So that was another learning.
Did that create a financing challenge then in terms of raising the capital? Was that one of your, would you say, reasons for, we use the word failure, but whatever. I mean, learnings. I mean, in terms of, okay, we really couldn't get the capital we needed to execute on this model, and they're seeing the inherent challenge in the model, but not being recurring. Of course, during that time, everything has to be recurring.
Right.
We're sort of in that phase of how people evaluate businesses. So those are two good ones. If you need VC funding, make sure you're actually framing your business to be in the path of that progress.
Yeah, that it's a high growth business. It's not necessarily more of like a lifestyle business, right? Because I would imagine that could have been a really nice lifestyle business. It's sort of like, grew well, but not at the scale that most VC investors are looking for.
And you've kind of like, I mean, if I just think about your past, you've operated mostly with VC investors. I mean, so that's interesting in and of itself too. Like, we have entrepreneurs on here that some have taken, you've kind of done both, VC, angel, big angel investing. I've done a little bit of both, but probably been more comfortable in the smaller angel investing side. Why you're obviously benefiting from that? Why default to that as opposed to sort of the bootstrap mode? I mean, for you personally, because you're inviting someone else to the table, and now they've got a bigger contribution and the execution. I mean, especially at this point, I guess, of your career. Why do you think that is necessary?
Yeah, I mean, to you guys' point, it's not necessary for every business, and there's definitely a lot of most businesses probably shouldn't take venture capital. It's for a very kind of narrow category of businesses that benefit from it, and a lot of firms, you give someone rocket fuel, you can cause a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah.
So. But rocket fuel has its applications, right? And if you want to scale very quickly, generally, like, having an infusion of capital very quickly is helpful for that. Also for things that require upfront technological development or investment, taking on outside capital is also helpful. I mean, you can build a tech company where you fund it based on customers or revenue. And I think there's a lot of great businesses that have done that. But if you need to do some upfront development and it's not going to be sufficient for, just Mike coding away in his basement to get the product out, VC money can be helpful. But yeah, you're going to want to be like a highly scalable business that has like, almost like zero cost of distribution. I know some like there's some hardware companies that do very well with VC and like, so, there aren't like hard and fast rules, but generally you're going to want to be like a software company that has low distribution costs. Like once you build this thing, you can sell it for very little over and over again.
So is that what you did with Zesty AI? I mean, you still stay in the renewable energy solar segment.
Zesty was in the property insurance segment.
Oh, property insurance segment. Okay.
Yeah. So it was selling data,
which was a great pivot, right? I mean, from solar to analyzing roofs and risk associated to not just the roof, right? But
and was that a venture capital backed business as well? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very different from where we started, like, selling solar panels to consumers to selling data to insurance companies. Big enterprise sales, so long sales cycles, but big contracts that last, big multi-year contracts once you do get over that kind of hump of the long enterprise sales cycles. So you have lots of recurring revenue there. I think it is a much better business model for VC than the first one. I think venture capital also enables you to hire probably better people than you deserve at the time because you can afford. You can afford.
I like the characterization of it. Better people than you deserve. You don't know what you're doing quite yet. Right. Looking for product market.
Sometimes that can come back to bite you, right?
And now you've got this high left
higher, but
for sure. But the technical depth you can get. Now I can pay someone $250,000 instead of trying to talk them into 75 and some options and something that may end up being something. They can kind of find a hybrid to that a little bit.
Yeah,
I agree with that. That's been a perpetual challenge, I feel, for some of the companies I've been involved with. Like, I know they could really benefit from this. It's just not on the plate quite yet.
Right.
I got to get to the Series A. You got the gap scenario before that is palatable, based on your burn or whatever. But
but you need to align your business to what investors are looking for and, their model, right? Like it's a hit driven business,
grow fast and sell.
Right. So like every business they back, they need to believe is going to be a unicorn. It's going to have a massive exit because, only a handful of them are. It's going to pay for the rest, but they need to believe for every investment they make that you have the chance of becoming.
You need to believe it too, because if you're in that lane, then you're sort of expecting that same result, right?
Right. So you're playing this game where you swing big. Not all of it's going to work out, but you're getting paid to take that big shot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of successful businesses that, are singles, doubles that need to do that, but they're not appropriate for venture capital, right?
So back to your kind of journey as it relates to that, then when you were at Zesty and then you left to start Paxton, was it still at an exit, or do you just decide, hey, got to this amount of people, I've done my job, I'm kind of, the more I'm getting to know you, which is, just recently, as you've moved to Bend, but you're kind of a startup guy, you're right there. I want to be, whether you're financed big or not, it sounds like fortunately you've been able to be in the right businesses to get, the venture interest, but you're still very early in the cycle, right? You're co-founder, right? So
it gets boring.
And do you just find you get to 100 or 200, that's just who you are. And like, hey, I know that at this point something's coming out of this and I can go kind of start looking at what else is happening. Is that what happened with Zesty and you just decided to?
Yeah, know thyself, right?
Yeah.
We got to Series B. The company's still operating. Co-founders are still running it. And the business is doing well, but it's a different business from the early stage startup, which I really love is the early days like that. Building stuff greenfield with a small team who's like committed. That's a lot of fun. And there are people who have a lot of fun at the Series B, C, and beyond who will do a better job than
different skill sets and personalities that are required. Yeah, but
I think there's not that I've war metaphors too much, but like,
take the beach, protect the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard of this framing, but you have special forces, soldiers, and police, and they are appropriate for different stages in a company. So, the special forces, there's a couple of them. They have to be really good generalists. They get dropped in the enemy territory, figure out what they can, but they set the stage for the soldiers who are, larger force, still kind of nimble. You still want people who like can think on their feet and be aggressive, but there's a lot more of them and they need to act in this like coordinated way, right? So, that stage of the company is like, you got to put in organization processes like OKRs, performance reviews. You have to be able to orchestrate this big force moving in concert to really see stuff. And then once you've taken it, you get the police, right? Who kind of just maintain order, right?
Yeah.
And then,
I love that analogy.
That's a very good analogy.
So
and incidentally, we had a Special Forces Army Ranger on cast, Kyle Morris, who started a software company.
Very cool.
And he went to he was also an entrepreneur because he went to Oregon Entrepreneur Business School. But now that you frame it that way, I'm thinking, oh, okay, this makes sense for this type of temperament and skill set. I mean, it's a
fundamentally different people. Yeah.
It's not just a metaphor. It's fundamentally who he is and what he did. And then, that was private equity, and they found their exit, and subsequently he's now left. He's kind of operating and doing his thing, and same type of thing. Maybe he'll go back in and exercise that muscle again, since it's sort of inherent in who he is. Yeah, it's good. It's good I like that. That was
I can't take credit for it. I think it was the CEO of DuckDuckGo who put that out, or he probably got it from somewhere. But
that's the first time I've heard it.
You should take credit.
I won't credit Michael.
I would be, if you asked me to do a police job, I would be bored out of my mind. If I put a police type person in my role, they would have a panic attack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, there's different personality types that I think are attracted to different stages of companies or different levels of maturity of companies. I've seen a lot of people try to be something they're not. Yeah, they're never happy, and they don't end up doing a good job either. So I think it's try to if you can match that with the company stage, I think it tends to work out better.
Yeah. So along the lines of the people side, I'm curious. Now with the generative AI wave that you're on with Paxton, are you seeing any fundamental differences on the team side? Like what kind of people you need? We keep hearing this, like software engineers are dead. There's no more work for them.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
And, fundamentally it's very different what we're asking of tech teams now. So I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing and sort of the history that you've had, right? And early on with AI and big data to now, like how does the people side differ?
Yeah. You can start a company with far fewer people today because of all the things that can give you leverage. Like you think back to the first internet boom, like you had to build your own data center, right?
Yeah.
And that's why all the
own servers,
right?
Yeah. I remember our server's down. It's 2 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now if you were to start a company and you were like, I'm going to build my own data center, people are like, what?
That's crazy.
So like, that's just the skills. There's the great data center operator types that, are at the big cloud companies now, but you don't need a person like that at your company anymore. And, same thing with like a lot of functions. Like, you can now outsource, like we use like something called a PEO for like all of our benefits and HR management, like we outsource that. If you're doing a remote company, I don't need to manage real estate anymore. So, we don't need like an office manager. I don't have to worry about having like snacks on hand. Like all that
someone to clean the aquarium.
Yeah. You used to have to like get a janitorial contract, like we just get to focus on the actual business now. To focus a lot more on like delivering what matters for your clients and not all the extraneous stuff that you used to have to do. So you can be far more capital efficient. I work with a much smaller team than I think you used to be able to.
But how about like on the core engineering team? Like, are you finding that like traditional software engineers are no good for what you need to do?
No,
or are they transitioning pretty well to the new forms of engineering the solutions that you're working on?
I think what's always been important for me, it's great if you know a certain technical skill and you're an expert in that. But what's always been important for me is like aptitude and the mentality. Like people who are naturally curious, always want to learn, always want to upskill. Like those people do well at Paxton. And I think just generally, and they're doing well in this AI transition. Like a software engineer paired with like tools like Cursor or other even just ChatGPT provides so much more leverage than a software engineer operating without AI. And so our engineers are like they're excited to like learn the new stuff and stay up to date on what's changing. And I think if folks are going to like adapt and survive, like you kind of need to adapt that mentality. You can't expect to remain static and be relevant.
Yeah. But you're finding that generally it's not like trying to take a police officer and making them a sniper, right? Or
you need people with the right mentality. I've come across people who some of my friends, they I want to check out at 5 and I have hobbies and I have a life and that's great. But like, you're not going to do well in a startup. It's just a different type of mentality. And, if you want to do well as a software engineer in a startup, I think you need to like have the mentality that, I don't necessarily know everything, but I'm going to try to figure it out. I'm going to try to leverage the latest and greatest tools because that's what's going to enable me to have a lot more leverage and to stay current on everything. But yeah, there's those folks who they're like, I've been doing the same thing forever. I don't want to learn anything new. And that's not going to be the right type for this sort of role.
It makes sense. And this kind of builds off something else I wanted to ask you about that you touched on earlier. Well, one of the things, to me, what I'm hearing when I hear you articulate that is this is a trait that's sort of really important for startups to succeed that I've been involved with, that sort of consummate learner. The other thing I think that I'm
curiosity,
and you probably have, and I know I have a checklist of traits I look for in an entrepreneur. But the other thing I'm kind of trying to get my head around in these times, and you mentioned your remote company and you have all these efficiencies you gain, and is sort of how do you maintain a culture of commitment? Because part of that working past 5 or just always want to be learning and, believing in the mission is you're sort of connected to the people and you're around them and you're growing together. I mean, we had another guest on who was like, now he built a software company where now, get everybody back to the office. The worst thing that happened was the remote thing. And so, I guess for myself, it was sort of a hybrid. We had a home office, but half our company was remote, the last one that I ran. But I am always thinking and concerned about the culture element, and it's easy to, I'm on the call, but I'm not really paying attention,
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing to have success with your culture in this remote environment? If you could help us understand if there's, any new practices you've had to put in, or just in general,
Yeah. And I think you can have a great culture in office and you can have a great culture remotely. And, the flip side, you can have bad culture, right?
True.
Not just because you're in person doesn't mean you're going to have a great culture. Like I've worked plenty of places.
There's no guarantees. Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah.
We don't need a name company. Disparity, but someone may be working at that company.
Exactly. So I think it's important when you're going to have a culture no matter what, and you want to be intentional about it. And this was true in person, and it's true remote. You're going to have a culture anyway, so why not make it a good one? And I think for people who are not going to work well without that supervision, without me like breathing down their neck, it wasn't going to work out anyway. That's not the type of people I like to work with. Like I like to work with people who are high trust, high autonomy, who like have this intrinsic motivation. And whether we're in person or not, like those are the type of people I want to surround myself with. But you can't just take the in-office culture or processes and just put them online. I think that burns a lot of people out. So I think I don't know if you guys are familiar with the company GitLab. They're probably the largest company that was like remote from inception to now they're a public multi-billion-dollar company. they put up their handbook on their website for free about all their remote best practices. It's such a goldmine for how to run a remote company well. And we actually just we brought on a new product director from GitLab, and he's been like helping us implement a lot of this stuff, which has been great because I went from being kind of a fanboy who just read this thing online, and now we have someone who actually did it. So you want to have a good culture of writing, which I thought, that was something great even before remote. Was like, if you have a culture around documenting things well and communicating things through writing, that'll help you in a remote environment, trying to do stuff more async versus calling a meeting every time, because that can like burn people out.
Yeah, use Zoom calls. Yeah.
And then we try to get people together twice a year for offsites, which it's a bit of a way of cramming in all those like lunches and happy hours into like a short period of time. But you do just notice a difference in how people interact after we do those. Like people are a lot more relaxed. They got to see people with their hair down, I think you do need those moments of in-person connection to do it well, but it doesn't all have to be from the water cooler or lunches. You can do it in like, let's get everyone together at a particular location.
Yeah.
And it makes it special that it's not every day and it's not all the time. So people kind of cherish that. But I think you could do both, but either way, you're going to have to be intentional, and you're going to have to put in effort, whether you're in person or remote, to make something good.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Great answer. Yeah. The other wrinkle I would add to that, I'm curious in your experience running your last thing, like what you thought about that trade-off with remote, because you guys had an office.
Well, we had hybrid, right? Which is not good at all. So as do
you think you got to go one or the other, really?
Oh man. Kind of. I mean, when you're in that environment where you're naturally hybrid, going fully remote's pretty attractive because you're already halfway there, right? And those people are feeling left out because they're not part of the office culture.
That's the thing I was going to pick up on right there, because I experienced a little bit of that. Like, you hear the people in the office kind of laughing on the phone, the remote people are being quiet.
Right.
Really, what was the inside joke I just made?
Right.
So you're sort of left out of that a little bit.
It's terrible.
But I got a way to maybe mitigate that a little bit. And you got to go test this out because I'm not running.
I'm going to
No, I got a way to we started testing. I thought was pretty effective, which was more sort of, we did the big retreats and then you got your executive retreat, but we did more departmental retreats too. Now the danger in that was, now they're a little isolated. Yeah, but they're in the big retreat too. They're in it, so they feel like they're, mission wise, aligned, and just kind of getting that interpersonal exchange more. And you get to the big retreat, frankly, there's some people that really want to socialize and they want to go. There's other people that won't. They just continue to sit, talk late. They don't just have coffee. So you're kind of forcing people in the constructs they don't want to be in.
Right.
And I was always very uncomfortable with that. So anyway, that might be another way to think about if you are completely hybrid.
Yeah.
Because like we had our customer service here, most people, and so they were pretty close, and I felt like our developers were close too, but they were distributed most of them weren't, so it's a
challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Super challenge.
But he made it his point on being intentional from the start. I think is almost the biggest point, right? Like, hey, you're going to go remote. Great. Everybody's going to, you still got to have a culture. What are the expectations? What are your values? That you're going to be important to people. And
when you start off that way and you're intentional about it, you're making hiring decisions based on that. Because frankly, I think that's one of the challenges with remote environments is that there are a lot of people that will never be successful in a remote only environment, right? They're just not built that way. They see that freedom and they're like, oh man, the beach is looking nice right now. So they just frankly will never be, they need to be in an office to be productive.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I know people who played solitaire all day in the office, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Pretending to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I call them corporate squatters.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
a lot of those.
No, I think it's important to be intentional and, something that we did very early on at both Paxton and Zesty was like have a conversation with everyone about what our values, what our mission, and what our culture is going to be like. And that gets people bought in. And I think it's good to periodically remind people of what those are. And like, we're not going to be a place for everyone. There's these particular things that we believe and hold true and value. And if you don't hold those as well, like this isn't the place for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, I think great companies or organizations do kind of take a stand like that and don't.
And they weed people out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't fit. Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I can't believe it, but here we go. There goes an hour. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. And we cover a lot, so I appreciate your time, man, sharing everything. Yeah. Paxton, I'm going to be obviously watching your company closely. And I mean, there's more I want to talk about, but I also be cognizant of your time and our listeners' time. I do love that you're located, one of the main founders in Bend, Oregon, and being able to do this remotely, and you've been, there and other places as well. And so the fact that you're, able to operate this business here and a big function of it here and lead it here is, I think, encouraging.
Yeah.
For the bending rules, the true bending part of that.
And actively riding a tsunami.
Yeah.
Talk about a big wave.
It's a good sign. Thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a lot.
Cheers.